Objects in the skies over North America have continued to make headlines. US President Joe Biden made his first substantial comments on the matter, saying he made no apologies for shooting down the Chinese surveillance balloon.
Make no mistake, if any object presents a threat to the safety and security of the American people, I will take it down.
It was the first time he'd made a speech about the incursion into US airspace. He also promised to take up the matter with Chinese President Xi Jinping. But he reiterated that the other three objects shot down by the US were not connected to China. It all came as China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, visited Europe to try and repair strained ties with nations on the continent. The European Union has repeatedly called out China to use its influence over Russia to end the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. FSS Giles Gibson in Rome was tracking the visit.
Wang Yi is sitting down with top Italian officials after meeting the French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris on Wednesday. The focus of those talks was very much on the ongoing war in Ukraine, which has really driven a wedge between the EU and China. And that's because while the EU has condemned the Russian invasion, while it's sent military assistance and aid to the Ukrainians, China throughout the conflict has remained neutral, although it has repeatedly called for there to be peace negotiations between the Russians and the Ukrainians. After wrapping up his trip to Rome, Wang Yi is then expected to travel to Germany and Hungary before finishing his tour of the continent in Russia.
The cleanup continued this week of toxic chemicals in a small town in the US state of Ohio, 2 weeks after a train derailed and exploded. East Palestine residents demanded answers and reassurances that they're safe to return home amid continuing fears for their health and safety. FSN's Sally Patterson was on the ground and sent this report from East Palestine.
Packed into the gym of the local high school, East Palestine residents didn't hold back. They had gathered together looking for answers, hoping to hear from the number of authorities involved in cleaning up the mess. But representatives of the railway company Norfolk Southern, whose train was carrying several toxic chemicals, didn't show up. They cited concerns about the growing physical threat to their employees. With many people in this village still living in temporary accommodation, questions remain over the safety of the air and the water.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. There was another US mass shooting, this time at Michigan State University. It left 3 students dead and several injured. The 43-year-old gunman died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, leaving police unsure of the motive. That is the 19-year-old gunman who shot and killed 10 black people inside a Buffalo supermarket in New York last year was sentenced to life in prison. The sentencing was briefly interrupted on Wednesday after a man ran towards the convicted gunman, leading to a brief adjournment. FSN's Jody Jacobs was tracking developments from New York.
Peyton Gendron will now spend the rest of his life behind bars. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was an emotional day inside the courthouse, with the shooter telling the court that he cannot express how much he regrets all the decisions he'd made leading up to his absence on